I never imagined my wedding day would turn into a viral wedding drama before the cameras even finished flashing. I remember standing under the chandelier, the weight of the veil resting lightly over my shoulders, believing I was moments away from stepping into a new chapter of my life. The orchestra had just played the soft notes of our first dance when my husband, Marcus, leaned in as if to whisper something sweet. Instead, his hand cracked across my face. The sound was sharp, clean, violent enough to echo through the ballroom like someone had slammed a metal door. For a moment, the world froze. The violinist stopped mid-stroke. My mother gasped loud enough to pierce through the hush. Guests stared at me, their expressions twisted with shock, confusion, and the kind of pity I had always feared. Marcus stood there, breathing hard, his jaw clenched, his eyes blazing with the kind of anger usually hidden behind closed doors, anger I'd been pretending didn't exist. His fingers trembled, not with regret, but with frustration that his mask had slipped in public. He waited for me to cry, he waited for me to crumble. He wanted the room to see me as weak, emotional, unstable, a bride humiliation moment he thought would prove something about me. Even then, I wasn't sure what. But instead of folding in on myself, I straightened my spine. I lifted my chin. I locked eyes with him and held that stare so long the guests started whispering. I felt the sting on my cheek, hot and pulsing, but inside me, something colder than ice was forming. A decision, a promise, a quiet storm that didn't need thunder to be real. I didn't raise my hand to touch the mark. I didn't blink. I didn't flinch for his satisfaction. I smiled, not a soft bride's smile, a slow one, the kind that says, "You don't know what I know, and you're about to regret everything." And right there, in front of every friend, every coworker, every member of his polished family, I opened my mouth and did the one thing that would ruin him completely. People think a slap is the peak of emotional betrayal, but the truth I dropped seconds later made the slap seem small. Before I tell you what I said to destroy him, you need to understand the truth about Marcus and the toxic marriage story that led to that moment. We weren't married long. In fact, that wedding ceremony was supposed to be our fresh start after months of tension. To everyone else, Marcus was the charming fiancé. Handsome, educated, stable career, a perfect gentleman with impeccable suits and a smile he polished like chrome. But charm is often camouflage. We met 2 years before the wedding at a charity gala I attended for work. I was there representing a youth foundation, and he was there to impress the wealthy donors his company relied on. When he saw me across the room, he moved with the confidence of someone used to getting everything he wanted. He introduced himself, made me laugh, and for a while I believed his interest was real. It felt refreshing to be noticed by a man who looked like he belonged in a luxury magazine spread. He pursued me hard, showering me with attention, dinners, gifts. People called us the perfect couple. They'd say things like, "She's finally found someone stable," or "He's so protective, that's real love." I used to believe that too, at least in the beginning. But protection can morph into control so slowly you barely notice the shift. It began with subtle comments, soft, sweet, manipulative. He'd say he only wanted the best for me. He'd compliment me while suggesting what I should do differently. He'd tell me he preferred when I wore certain clothes or saw certain people. He disliked a few of my male coworkers, accused them of getting too comfortable, even though I'd known them longer than him. I brushed it off. He just loved me, right? That's how controlling husbands start, not with orders, with suggestions that feel like affection. Then the financial concerns began. He'd say things like, "Let me take care of things. I don't want you stressed." He convinced me to let him handle certain bills because it was more efficient. I trusted him. I believed he was supporting me. But trust is dangerous when placed in the wrong hands. The first time he raised his voice at me was over something small, a misplaced receipt. The explosion caught me off guard. The apology afterwards was tearful, dramatic, full of promises he never intended to keep. Every cycle of conflict was followed by expensive gifts, fancy dinners, and long messages about how he'd do better. By the time we got engaged, I had convinced myself he was simply stressed. Work pressure, family expectations, life. But stress doesn't justify cruelty. The night before the wedding, we argued about something minor. My makeup artist, a longtime friend, hugged me too long when leaving my rehearsal dinner. Marcus grabbed my arm later and said I was being too friendly with people. His grip left a faint red mark that I covered the next morning with concealer. While my bridesmaids laughed and sipped mimosas, I told myself everything would be okay once we said our vows. Love is louder on wedding days, or at least you're encouraged to pretend it is. But standing there under the chandelier, after the slap cracked across my face, everything finally became clear. The wedding wasn't a new beginning. It was a trap I had spent too long ignoring. People assume moments like that slap are where a relationship breaks, but the truth is more uncomfortable. Relationships rot long before they collapse. The decay is slow, hidden under gestures that pretend to be love. As I stood in that ballroom, staring at Marcus after he struck me, I realized I had spent 2 years making excuses for him. I had stitched together a version of him that I wanted to believe in. The man who planned surprise dates. The man who listened to my work stories. The man who held me at night and whispered promises about our future home, children, vacations. But I also remembered the man who monitored my social media. The man who casually criticized my friends. The man whose anger simmered under his designer shirts. The man who insisted we merge finances for our future, but never let me see certain accounts. The man whose temper wasn't triggered by big problems, but by anything he couldn't control. By the time of the wedding, I had become an expert at walking on emotional eggshells, smoothing over conflict before it started. I adjusted my clothes, my tone, even my facial expressions to avoid setting him off. People think abuse is loud. Sometimes it's quiet and well-dressed. That day, the venue was dripping in gold decor. Rose petals lined the aisle in perfect symmetry. The air smelled like jasmine and champagne. His family had flown in from all over, Florida, London, Lagos, each one dressed like they owned stock in luxury. They loved Marcus, or at least they loved the version he showed them, a hard-working, generous son who was marrying a woman they believed was lucky to have him. My family was smaller, less polished, more genuine. My mother had spent weeks sewing tiny pearls on my veil by hand. My father kept tearing up every time he looked at me. They didn't have money or flash, but they had love, patience, humility. They raised me in a home where nothing ever smelled like fear. So when Marcus slapped me, they moved faster than anyone. My father stood up so violently his chair scraped across the floor. My mother grabbed my maid of honor's wrist so hard she gasped. My siblings froze with fury, tightening every muscle in their bodies. I could feel the heat of their rage radiating toward me. But I didn't want them to interfere. Not yet. Not before I did what I came to do. Because the truth is, I didn't walk into that wedding blindly. I had spent months preparing, gathering evidence, watching him unravel, and that slap didn't break me. It validated everything I already knew. But none of the guests knew that. They saw a bride hit in front of hundreds of people, and they waited for the collapse. They expected someone to scream. They expected someone to call security. They expected tears, chaos, the dramatic storytelling scene of a ruined ceremony. But instead, I smiled, because I wasn't the one about to lose everything. He was. Marcus knew it too. I watched the realization flicker across his face. His breathing changed. His shoulders tensed. He knew he'd lost control, and losing control terrified him more than anything. "What the hell is wrong with you?" he hissed, low enough for only me to hear. I kept my voice steady. "Everything I've been needing to say," I replied. Then the whispers rose like wind through tall grass. Guests leaned in, phones discreetly lifted. The slap had already turned into a real-life wedding story people would gossip about for years, but they had no idea the real show hadn't started. Because standing there, cheek burning, heart hammering, I knew exactly what to do, and I promised myself this controlling husband would never humiliate me again, not after what I was about to reveal. The moment after the slap felt heavier than the moment before it. My cheeks still tingled, but the deeper sting was the realization that Marcus had shown his real self at the worst possible time for him, and the best possible time for me. I could feel his mother staring at me from the front row, her lips pressed so tight the pink drained out of them. She had always suspected I wasn't grateful enough for her son. Today, she was watching me like I was responsible for the chaos her golden boy had created. The guests were whispering non-stop. I caught bits of it floating through the murmuring crowd. Did he really hit her? Maybe she provoked him. This wedding is cursed. I knew he had a temper. She should leave. My mother shot Marcus a look sharp enough to cut steel. My father had started walking towards us, his fists clenched, but I lifted my hand to stop him. He hesitated, confused. Pain crossed his face, like he couldn't understand why I wasn't reacting the way a humiliated bride should. But humiliation wasn't what I felt. What I felt was relief. For the first time in months, I wasn't pretending anymore. Marcus stepped closer to me. "Fix your face," he muttered. "We're not ruining this day." "We?" I said slowly. "Marcus, you ruined this day the moment your hand touched me." His eyes widened with that familiar flash of warning, a look I had spent too long avoiding. But today, it didn't scare me. If anything, it steadied me, because I finally understood what it meant. Marcus only had power when I cooperated, when I softened, when I let him rewrite reality. The moment I stopped participating, the whole structure he built began to crack. His voice dropped into a hiss. "Don't start, not here." "Exactly here," I said. "This is where it ends." A soft gasp rippled through the room. Maybe it was my mother. Maybe it was one of his cousins. Maybe it was me. Marcus grabbed my wrist tight, the same way he had the night before. His fingers dug into my skin, but this time I didn't hide the discomfort. I didn't swallow it. I didn't pretend everything was fine. I pulled my wrist free slowly, deliberately, letting every eye in the room see the gesture. "Let go of me," I said, my voice steady. He stepped back, masking panic with disdain. "You're being dramatic." "That's ironic," I said. He narrowed his eyes at me the way he always did when he felt threatened. And for the first time, I didn't care about his reaction. I didn't care about the consequences. I wasn't shrinking. I wasn't smoothing things over. I wasn't protecting his image. The version of me he had built his control around was gone. I looked at the guests, hundreds of faces, some judgmental, some sympathetic, some hungry for drama. The ballroom was suddenly silent again, the kind of silence that stretches too long and then stretches even longer. This was the moment, not of collapse, of clarity, because I was done protecting a man who had never protected me. I took a small step forward so the microphone near us could catch my voice. The ballroom lights glowed against my dress, making me look softer, more fragile than I felt, but inside, I was granite. "I need everyone's attention," I said. Every head snapped toward me. Even the servers paused mid-step. The wedding planner froze with her clipboard halfway raised. Marcus's face drained of color. He knew I never spoke without thinking, and the truth I was about to tell wasn't improvised. It had been sitting inside me, waiting for the moment he revealed what he truly was. "Before this wedding continues, I have something important to share." Marcus motioned to cut me off, but I raised my hand and he actually stopped, not because he respected me, but because he could feel the eyes on us. His self-image couldn't survive another public outburst. He swallowed hard. "Sweetheart, don't." Sweetheart. That word sounded rotten coming from him now. I kept my eyes on the guests. What happened just now wasn't an accident, and it wasn't the first time. Whispers erupted instantly. A wave of noise washed over the crowd as people leaned in, shocked, scandalized, hungry for the truth. "He didn't just hit me today. He's been controlling me for months. He screamed at me, grabbed me, isolated me, and convinced me that if anything went wrong, it was my fault." Marcus inhaled sharply. "Stop this." I didn't. "Today, you all saw who he really is, but you haven't seen what I've been collecting. The messages, the recordings, the financial documents, the things he hoped I'd never find." A ripple of collective disbelief swept the room, but before anyone could process the weight of what I said, I turned back to Marcus. "You thought I was afraid of you. but you should have been afraid of me." Marcus's expression shifted from arrogance to alarm. The change was subtle but unmistakable. He finally understood what was happening. I wasn't breaking down, I was breaking free, and I'd come prepared. Marcus's panic was quiet but unmistakable. His pupils tightened, his jaw flexed, and for the first time since I'd known him, he looked like a man who wasn't sure he'd survive the next 5 minutes. Not because I would hurt him the way he hurt me, but because his spotless image, the only thing he truly cared about, was seconds away from shattering. His mother stood from her seat. "What is she talking about?" she demanded, with her voice trembling with outrage. Her gold bracelets jingled as she pointed at me like I was some uninvited guest ruining her family's reputation. I didn't look at her. My focus stayed on him. "Marcus," I said, "do you want to tell them or should I?" "Tell them what?" His voice cracked. "Not much, but enough. That we shouldn't even be here today. That this wedding was a performance to hide what you've been doing behind closed doors." Gasps again. The ballroom felt like a living furnace, every pair of eyes burning into us. Marcus shook his head slowly, trying to regain control. "Baby, you're overwhelmed. Calm down." Overwhelmed, the same word he used whenever he wanted me to question my own reality. "Don't call me that," I said. My voice was calm, but it landed like a slap of its own. His shoulders jerked back at the rejection. His mother clutched her pearls, whispering something to the aunt beside her. The wedding planner hovered uselessly near the DJ booth, torn between calling security and pretending nothing unusual was happening. A bridesmaid whispered, "Should we do something?" Another replied, "This is wild." People had started recording, not discreetly, not subtly, openly. Phones out, cameras pointed. I could practically feel the light of their screens on my skin. If Marcus had any sense left, he'd know the footage would hit social media before the bouquet even wilted. Marcus stepped closer, lowering his voice. "You're embarrassing yourself." "No, Marcus," I said. "I'm revealing you." His nostrils flared. "Stop this. You should have thought about that before you hit me in front of 300 people. His face twitched. He looked to the crowd as if searching for someone to defend him, but the guests only stared as if watching an iceberg split open. No one rushed to his side. Even his best man stood frozen where the groomsmen were supposed to line up, eyes wide, mouth slightly open. My father stood near the aisle, shaking with rage, but still respecting my signal to stay back. My mother's eyes were wet, but she didn't cry. She looked proud, like she was finally seeing that I wasn't the fragile daughter Marcus thought he could mold. I took a breath and said what needed to be said. "I didn't walk into this wedding blind," I said. "I walked in ready." The whispers sharpened. Someone said, "Ready for what?" "For the truth," I answered, loud enough for the microphone to catch it, loud enough to echo under the chandelier. Marcus lunged for the microphone stand, desperate to cut the audio, but I stepped between him and the hardware with a stability he didn't expect. The crowd gasped again. He froze mid-step, his hand suspended in the air. That was when he realized he had lost control, not just of me, but of the entire room. "I know about the offshore account," I said. The room fell silent so quickly it felt like the air was sucked out. Marcus's hand dropped, his face drained. His mother sat down abruptly, almost collapsing into her chair. His father clenched the arms of his seat. The cousins in designer suits stiffened like statues. People leaned forward in disbelief, and I could feel the tension tightening the entire ballroom like a pulled wire. "You don't know what you're talking about," Marcus whispered, but the tremor in his voice gave him away. "I do," I said, "and I know where the money came from." A man in the corner coughed nervously. A woman muttered, "Oh my God." Marcus closed his eyes for half a second, a tiny, damning moment of panic, a moment no one could mistake for innocence. "What money?" someone from his side of the family asked, already sounding afraid of the answer. I didn't blink. The money Marcus laundered through his company. People gasped. Someone swore. The DJ covered his mouth. The servers exchanged horrified looks. Even the florist, who had been adjusting centerpieces minutes earlier, was now frozen mid-bow. I wasn't finished, and I have proof, I added quietly. Marcus looked like his heart stopped. This wasn't about the slap anymore. This was about everything he thought he had buried, everything he thought I would never see. I softened my voice, but only to deliver the final strake. You didn't choose the wrong moment to hit me, I said. You chose the wrong woman to underestimate. And that's when Marcus finally broke. The fear rolled off him like heat. The guests saw it. His family saw it. His friends saw it. Everyone saw that the perfect groom, the successful fiancé, the charming gentleman, was a criminal who had just punched his own downfall into existence. And the best part? I hadn't even started yet. The ballroom felt different now. Before, the air was heavy with shock. Now it vibrated with something else. Anticipation. People weren't just watching a wedding fall apart. They were watching a man unravel in real time, layer by layer, lie by lie. Marcus stumbled back half a step. It was small, but it was the kind of movement a confident man never makes. The kind of movement a guilty man can't hide. You don't know what you're saying, he whispered. You don't understand how business works. I understand theft. I understand money being moved where it shouldn't. I understand shell companies. I understand fake invoices. I understand everything you thought I was too in love to question. Some guests audibly gasped. Others sucked in breath like they were afraid oxygen was about to run out. Marcus closed his eyes for half a second, a tiny, damning moment of panic, a moment no one could mistake for innocence. Enough of this. His mother stood again, voice shaking. You are humiliating yourself. Sit down before you say something you can't take back. I'm not the one who needs to worry about what I've said. Sit, she ordered, like I was a child talking out of turn. I turned and looked directly at her. Your son hit me in front of all of you. After months of lying, cheating, stealing, and pretending he was the victim every time he got caught, and you want me to sit? She blanched. Marcus tried to jump in. Don't talk to my mother like, you don't get to dictate how I talk. Not anymore. My voice didn't rise. I didn't need to shout. The microphone carried the truth cleanly across the room, amplifying every word. Marcus, I said, do you want me to keep going, or should we move on to what I found in your phone? The room exploded with whispers. You could feel the shock like static in the air. Marcus's mouth opened, but no sound came out. He knew exactly what I meant, and so did I. Because the night I found the offshore account, I found something else, something he never dreamed I would see. Photos, messages, plans. Things that would destroy the marriage before it even began. Things that would destroy him without the financial crimes. Marcus's voice was barely audible. Stop, please. The word please almost made the room tilt. Marcus never said please, not unless he needed something. Why should I stop? You didn't stop last night. A ripple of confusion moved through the guests. Last night? Someone whispered. Marcus's panic sharpened into anger. This is between us. No, Marcus, you made it everyone's business the moment you hit me. His best man, Terrence, finally moved. He stepped forward, looking torn between loyalty and horror. Bro, is any of this true? Marcus turned to him, desperate. She's twisting things. She's emotionally unstable right now. You know how weddings are. I started laughing. A soft laugh at first, then a fuller one, the kind you let out when someone tells a lie so ridiculous you can't help yourself. The guest stared at me like the bride had just lost her mind, but I wasn't losing anything. I was reclaiming it. I looked Marcus dead in the eye. You want to talk about unstable? Let's talk about how you showed up to dinner last night smelling like someone else's perfume, or how you kept your phone face down every second, or how you told me your bachelor party was boring, but you left your messages open on your laptop. Marcus flinched. His mother closed her eyes. Terrence whispered, "Damn." I continued, "You think I didn't know about the woman in Miami, the one you flew out last month, or the one from your gym, or the receipts hidden under false names?" Marcus swallowed hard. "Baby, we can talk about this later." "No, we're talking now." The guests looked trapped between shock, fascination, and disbelief. This wasn't a wedding anymore. It was a public autopsy of a relationship. I stepped closer to Marcus so only he could hear the next part, though the microphone still caught fragments. "You thought you were marrying a quiet woman, but you were marrying a woman who listened, a woman who watched, a woman who made copies of everything." Marcus closed his eyes like he was bracing for an impact. "And now," I said softly, "the impact begins." I turned back to the crowd. "This wedding is over." Someone dropped a glass. Someone else choked. The florist let out a tiny scream. Marcus grabbed my arm. It wasn't rough, but it was desperate. His voice cracked. "Don't walk away, please. We can fix this." I pulled my arm free. "You should have thought about fixing it before you tried to break me." His knees buckled slightly. He actually looked like he might fall. I took one final breath. Then I said the words that changed everything. "Security, please escort him out." The security guards who had been frozen near the back jolted into action. They approached Marcus as he backed away, shaking his head in disbelief. "You can't do this." But he was wrong. I already had. And the wedding guests watched as the groom, the man who slapped me, manipulated me, lied to me, cheated on me, and stole from his own company, was escorted out of his own wedding. And this was only the setup. I hadn't even begun the real ruin yet. The ballroom was stunned into silence. Marcus's expensive Italian shoes clicked against the marble floor as security guided him toward the exit. Guests whispered, gasped. Some were too shocked to even pull out their phones. A few snapped photos anyway, the kind that would end up as viral wedding drama posts by tomorrow. I let the silence settle over me. It was the calm after a storm I had long anticipated. I could feel my heart still racing, the adrenaline sparking a clarity that made me almost giddy, not from joy, but from control. For the first time in months, I was in control of the narrative. I looked around the room. Faces once impressed by Marcus now reflected fear, confusion, curiosity. His mother's lipstick had smudged. His father was muttering something I couldn't hear. The groomsmen avoided eye contact, their carefully constructed image of loyalty evaporating in seconds. And me, I stood taller than I had ever stood before. Not a single tear, not a single waver. The first wave of messages hit my phone. I glanced at the screen discreetly. Friends asking if I was okay, coworkers demanding details, strangers tagging me on social media. Bride humiliated by groom, wedding gone wrong, emotional betrayal caught live. The key words would trend within hours, and I couldn't help smiling. This was exactly what I wanted. After the wedding, the real work began. The fallout wasn't limited to social media or whispered conversations among guests. I had documents, recordings, photos, messages, proof of every lie, every betrayal. I spent the next few days compiling them into a dossier so meticulous that even a lawyer would be impressed. I started by confronting Marcus privately via email. I didn't just send threats. I outlined the consequences, the offshore accounts, the hidden transactions, the extramarital affairs, all of it laid bare. I requested restitution, an apology, a public acknowledgement. He ignored me. Of course he did. That was expected. A controlling husband never admits wrongdoing willingly. So I escalated. First came the subtle steps, messages to his business partners, anonymous tips about discrepancies in company filings, hints dropped to mutual friends who were powerful enough to make him sweat. Every call, every email, every small nudge was a calculated move. And Marcus began to crack. I knew it because the texts he sent me changed in tone, from arrogance to anger, from anger to fear, and finally, desperation. "You're insane," he wrote one night. "You'll ruin me," he threatened in another. Please, we can fix this privately, came the next. But I didn't respond. Not once. Instead, I let the network of witnesses, evidence, and whispers amplify my position. Friends who once adored him now questioned his integrity. Family members who trusted him began pulling back subtly, asking uncomfortable questions. Clients began noticing discrepancies, and the media, well, the media never sleeps when a viral wedding story intersects with corporate scandal. Meanwhile, I had to maintain my own life. My work, my family, my sanity, all were under pressure. Friends warned me about obsession, about overreach, but I wasn't obsessed. I was strategic. Revenge isn't about emotion, it's about precision. Then came the confrontations, small ones at first. A friend of Marcus's who didn't know about the offshore accounts confronted him at a dinner party. I wasn't there, but I knew. I had orchestrated the chance meeting. The humiliation he felt was delicious. Then his business partners started asking questions, the ones he thought loyal, untouchable, unassailable. They didn't see the full dossier yet, but they saw cracks forming, behavior inconsistent with his polished image. Meetings that were once routine became tense. Emails went unanswered. Reputation faltered. Marcus tried to fight back. He confronted me directly in person one night. His voice was low, controlled. He looked me in the eyes. "Stop. You're going too far. This is my life." I smiled softly. "You made this my life the moment you slapped me, Marcus. Every move you made, every secret you kept, you handed me the tools I needed." He lunged, trying to intimidate. Threats, anger, ultimatums. I stood my ground. I didn't flinch. And that's when I realized the truth. The real power of revenge isn't in the slap, the evidence, the humiliation. It's in the calm, patient accumulation of proof and patience that forces the other person to implode from their own guilt and fear. Marcus's empire started to wobble. Not yet collapse, but wobble. And for the first time in his life, he wasn't sure how to recover. I didn't rush him. I let him stew in uncertainty, let his mind circle every misstep he'd made, let the whispers grow louder. This was only the beginning. Marcus was unraveling faster than I could have anticipated. Every time he thought he had a grip on the situation, another piece of evidence surfaced, another whisper reached the right ears. The first week after the wedding felt like a battlefield. He tried the classic tactics, charm, apologies, and threats. He showed up at my apartment claiming he just wanted to talk. I let him in, barely. His cologne still smelled of expensive cedarwood, but the aura of control was gone. I could see it in the way he shifted on the couch, the way his hands fidgeted, the way he avoided my eyes. "I'm sorry about everything," he began, voice low. "We can fix this." I leaned back, calm, almost bored. "No, Marcus, you can't fix this. You can't fix what you created." He flinched at my words, realizing they weren't just words, they were truth. "I'll go to the media," he whispered, a desperate edge creeping in. "I'll deny everything. They won't believe her." I smiled, letting a fraction of the satisfaction show. "Oh, they'll believe me. You left too many trails, Marcus. The truth is already in people's hands, and I've made sure the right people will see it." Then came the more subtle attacks. He spread rumors about me, trying to tarnish my reputation. "She's unstable," he told friends and colleagues. "She's vindictive. She's obsessed with ruining me." I anticipated every move. Every attempt to undermine me backfired because the foundation he had built, the lies, the secrets, the betrayals, was now visible. People didn't need to hear my side. They could see the cracks in his. Business calls that once ran smoothly now ended in frustration. Partners questioned transactions. Employees whispered in hallways. The company that Marcus had carefully curated for years began to falter. He tried to manipulate mutual friends, offering money, gifts, promises, even apologies. But the more he tried, the worse it got. Friends who once adored him began distancing themselves. The whispers turned into pointed questions, then private confrontations. "Is this true?" people asked, and every time, Marcus had no answer. Meanwhile, I wasn't idle. I was strategic, patient, and precise.
I created a timeline of his actions, a dossier of indiscretions, and a series of anonymous tips to the press. Not sensationalized, not false, just the evidence he had left lying around for months, now compiled for maximum impact. The breaking point came during a board meeting. Marcus entered with his usual confidence, expecting routine nods and smiles, but instead the partners had the evidence I had sent in advance. The offshore accounts, fake invoices, and financial inconsistencies were laid bare on the conference table. The room went silent. Then came the questions, sharp, pointed, impossible to deflect. Marcus's face went pale as partners demanded explanations he couldn't provide. That night, I received a text from him.
"You're killing me. Please stop. We can negotiate." I didn't reply. I let him writhe, let him feel the fear and panic he had caused me for months, let him taste the same helplessness he tried to instill in me. As the weeks progressed, his life outside my sphere started collapsing too. Friends turned away, family whispered about the bride's claims, unsure what to believe. Social media exploded with comments, videos, screenshots. The viral wedding story spread faster than any of us could have imagined. And yet, Marcus continued to underestimate me. He believed I would tire. He believed I would relent. I didn't. I planned the next phase meticulously. I orchestrated chance encounters with people who had witnessed his manipulations firsthand. I leaked the proof to journalists who specialized in corporate misbehavior, making sure the narrative stayed factual but damning. Marcus's ego, which had been his armor, became his cage. Every move he made to regain control only deepened his exposure. By the time the first month after the wedding ended, Marcus wasn't just embarrassed, he was vulnerable. He wasn't just a groom gone wrong, he was a man exposed, teetering on the edge of total ruin. And I wasn't done. By the second month after the wedding, Marcus's facade had crumbled almost entirely. Where once he had walked into rooms with effortless charm, now he hesitated, scanning the crowd, calculating whether anyone was recording, listening, judging. Every step was cautious, every handshake measured, every smile forced. I stayed a few steps ahead of him. Every whisper, every glance, every rumor was a tool. I had realized early on that revenge wasn't about brute force. It was about subtle manipulation, about making him implode from his own guilt and fear. It started with small, almost invisible public exposures. I would casually mention an unusual detail in front of friends. "It's funny how Marcus never takes calls from his accountant." Or, "I always wonder why receipts for corporate dinners disappear." No direct accusations, just enough for curious minds to pry. Then came more aggressive steps. I authorized an anonymous tip to a financial journalist about discrepancies in his company's filings. Not false, not fabricated, simply evidence he created himself. By the next morning, the story circulated quietly online. Prominent businessman under financial scrutiny, questionable transactions revealed. The emails and texts from Marcus were frantic. "You're destroying me. I swear, stop this now. You're insane. You don't know the consequences. You'll regret this forever." I saved them all. Every desperate, trembling word became ammunition for the next phase. Meanwhile, his personal life was unraveling. His mother, who had always turned a blind eye to his manipulations, confronted him privately. "How could you hit her in front of all those people?" she demanded, her voice low but furious. The shame was a poison in his veins. He tried to explain, but there was no excuse. His friends, who had once formed a protective shield around him, began to distance themselves. Invitations disappeared, calls went unanswered. Rumors of the wedding slap mixed with whispers of financial misconduct and infidelity. Every social circle he had depended on became a minefield. He wasn't just losing allies, he was losing credibility. And credibility, Marcus had learned too late, was all he had. Then came the public confrontations. At a corporate mixer, a partner asked pointedly about the discrepancies. Marcus tried to bluff, but the evidence I had leaked preemptively left him no room to maneuver. The humiliation was subtle, but undeniable.
People were noticing. People were talking. I watched from the sidelines, smiling faintly, knowing exactly how the story would be told. The viral wedding slap had drawn attention to me, yes, but it also drew attention to everything he had tried to hide. And now, every attempt to recover only made him look worse. The next stage involved Marcus trying to regain control. He reached out to mutual friends, offering gifts, apologies, and promises. "Let's put this behind us," he begged. "We can fix this quietly." I declined. Every attempt at reconciliation only highlighted his desperation. Every failed effort, every crumbling lie only made the narrative more believable, more damning. Meanwhile, I carefully cultivated allies, people who had been hurt or manipulated by Marcus over the years. With their help, we created a network of witnesses ready to corroborate every detail I had. Financial advisors, former colleagues, even casual acquaintances who had noticed his behavior, all had a voice now. Marcus's paranoia intensified. He stopped going out, he stopped returning calls, he stopped trusting even his closest advisors. He would pace his mansion at night, muttering to himself, replaying the slap, my words, and the growing tide of evidence. I wasn't just dismantling him publicly, I was dismantling him privately, piece by piece, day by day. The breaking point came when he realized no amount of charm, no gift, no plea could restore his public image. He was a man exposed, isolated, stripped of the control he had wielded for years. And the worst part for him, he knew I wasn't finished. Marcus became a ghost in his own life. Invitations stopped coming, calls went unanswered, business meetings that had once defined him now ended in whispered skepticism. Every phone call, every knock at the door, every email became a minefield. He knew the truth was out there, and worse, he knew I controlled its release. I wasn't being cruel, I was precise. Every piece of evidence, every subtle revelation, and every orchestrated confrontation was calculated to make him feel the full weight of his actions, without endangering myself. It was like chess, and he had just realized he had been playing blindfolded.
Then came the viral consequences. Social media exploded. The wedding video, combined with carefully curated posts of his indiscretions, painted a picture of a man everyone had admired, but who was, in reality, a manipulator, a cheater, a fraud. Articles began popping up, commentary videos circulated. Even friends who had once been loyal now whispered and shared screenshots, each retelling adding more layers of shame. Marcus tried to push back. He contacted lawyers, social media managers, even PR consultants. He paid for spin, hired teams to suppress content, and tried to intimidate those who spoke publicly. Nothing worked. Every move he made added fuel to the fire. Every attempt to recover only highlighted the cracks he had so desperately hidden. Then came the confrontations that mattered most, face-to-face encounters with those he had wronged. Former employees who had signed NDAs suddenly found ways to speak anonymously. Former lovers posted their stories online. Friends who had enabled him were quietly reminded of their own complicity. Each interaction was a sting, a public unraveling, a reminder that his empire was built on deception and fear. I stayed in the eye of the storm, calm, measured, untouchable. Every whisper about me painted me as strong, composed, and unbreakable, the exact opposite of the man I had married. My reputation soared, while his crumbled. Then, one evening, the final straw. A business partner confronted him during a critical board meeting, armed with evidence I had leaked days earlier. The confrontation wasn't dramatic in the sense of shouting or slamming doors. It was surgical, quiet, methodical, undeniable. Marcus froze. Every colleague's eyes bored into him. Every witness confirmed the reality of his manipulations. By the time he left that room, Marcus wasn't just embarrassed, he was terrified. He didn't know who to trust, how to recover, or even how to breathe. Every decision he had ever made, every lie he had ever told, came back to confront him all at once. And I was the calm at the center. I didn't taunt him, I didn't gloat, I simply existed as a reminder of what he had lost: control, image, trust, and respect.
At home, he paced, he muttered, he replayed the wedding, my words, the evidence. His empire, his relationships, his carefully constructed life, all of it was unraveling thread by thread, and every day the pressure mounted. I had taught him a painful lesson without raising a hand. By now, Marcus's panic was obvious to everyone around him. Friends who once defended him distanced themselves. Family who once praised him questioned every decision. Colleagues who had admired him now whispered about instability and dishonesty. Social media posts circulated daily, each one more damning than the last. I watched it all unfold with precision. Every leak, every whisper, every public revelation had been planned. Nothing was left to chance. And yet, Marcus still didn't understand the full extent of the consequences. He believed he could fix it if he apologized enough, if he made enough promises, if he tried hard enough. He was wrong, because I had already won. The stage was set for the absolute climax, the moment where all the planning, all the patience, all the evidence, and all the strategic moves would collide. Marcus's empire, reputation, and public image were all dangling by a thread, and I was holding the scissors. The day of the final confrontation arrived without warning. Marcus had grown reckless, desperate, and transparent. He believed he could regain control, that the whispers would fade, that people would forget the wedding slap and the evidence I had methodically released. He was wrong. I arranged a meeting under the guise of reconciliation, not in a courtroom, not in public, not on social media, but in a high-profile charity gala he was attending, surrounded by influential figures and media presence, the perfect arena for ultimate exposure. When he saw me enter, his face paled. He understood immediately. He could see the poised, confident woman in a tailored dress moving through the room as if she owned every inch, and in a way, I did. He tried to intercept me. "We can talk privately," he whispered, panic barely masked. "Not privately," I said, my voice steady, controlled. "Not when everyone deserves to see the truth." Guests noticed the tension, but didn't yet understand the scope. Marcus's eyes darted around the room, searching for allies, searching for escape, searching for a way to reverse the momentum. There was none. I began by delivering subtle reminders. "I think you all remember Marcus," I said to the crowd, loud enough to catch attention without causing panic, "a man everyone admired for success, charm, and reliability. But behind the mask," I let the pause hang long enough to make the silence oppressive, "he hid control, manipulation, and betrayal." Gasps, murmurs, whispers. Cameras subtly turned toward us. I had timed this perfectly, every word recorded, every reaction documented. Marcus tried to intervene. "Stop, people are watching," he whispered, desperation seeping into his usual arrogance. I didn't stop. "You think this is about me? This is about accountability, about what happens when lies and abuse go unchecked, about the man you were versus the man you showed the world." The evidence I had accumulated over months was now displayed subtly through my orchestrated network. Emails, texts, financial documents, photographs, all carefully shared with key witnesses present at the gala. The room felt like a trap, and Marcus knew it. He tried excuses, deflections, charm. Nothing worked. Every colleague, every friend, every influential guest could see the cracks he had tried so hard to hide. Then came the final blow. I revealed calmly and deliberately the full extent of his financial manipulations, offshore accounts, falsified invoices, misappropriated funds, and embezzlement evidence, all documented and ready for authorities. The reaction was instantaneous. Gasps, whispers, pointed fingers. Guests pulled out phones, recording every word. Even the media stationed nearby began shifting focus, sensing the gravity of the revelation. Marcus went pale, voice trembling.
You can't," he stammered. "I can," I interrupted, "because you gave me the tools. Every lie, every betrayal, every moment you underestimated me." He looked around, realizing that he had no ally left. His charm had failed, his threats had failed, and his public image, once so carefully curated, was crumbling before everyone's eyes. Then I delivered the final verbal strike. "This isn't just about punishment, it's about truth. You wanted to control me, you wanted to humiliate me, you wanted to manipulate everyone. And now," I let the pause linger, letting every eye in the room focus on him. Everyone knows who you really are." Marcus's shoulders slumped. He was exposed, vulnerable, defenseless, and the crowd understood it immediately. Whispers became statements, doubt turned to certainty. The man who had slapped me at our wedding, who had lied, cheated, and stolen, was now publicly dismantled in a single orchestrated moment. I didn't need to shout. I didn't need to scream. My calm, precise delivery did more damage than any outburst could have. And in that moment, Marcus understood what he had lost. Not just me, not just the wedding, not just his reputation, but control over everything he had once thought untouchable. Marcus's face drained of color. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. His usual confident smirk, the one that had fooled everyone for years, was gone. What replaced it was panic, raw, naked panic. The guests, many of whom had once praised him as the perfect groom, now stared with disbelief and judgment. Cameras clicked, phones recorded, witnesses whispered. I could feel the collective shift in energy, the tide turning entirely against him. You can't," Marcus finally managed, his voice trembling. "I already have." Every whisper, every camera lens, every subtle recording was evidence of his unraveling. He tried to justify himself, tried to charm, tried to threaten. None of it worked. Each attempt made him look weaker, smaller, more exposed. His mother grabbed his arm. "Stop this! Enough!" she hissed, panic written across her face. But her words only highlighted the public collapse. Even his family was powerless to contain the truth. I revealed the final piece, the indisputable proof that tied every act together. Emails, photos, messages, receipts. Every lie, every betrayal, every financial misstep now had a trail he couldn't erase. The gasp from the crowd was audible, sharp, collective. Guests leaned forward, phones raised, ready to capture history in real time. His business partners exchanged horrified glances, whispering urgently. Colleagues avoided eye contact, some quietly recording for future protection. He tried to retreat, to escape the humiliation, but there was no exit. Every path he could take led to exposure. Every step forward drew the eyes of witnesses and cameras. I can fix this," he stammered, voice cracking. "You won't fix anything," I interrupted, soft but firm. "You lost control the moment your hand struck me at our wedding, and every lie, every secret, every betrayal has caught up to you." His eyes flickered, darting to the crowd, the cameras, the colleagues, the family. No one was on his side. He was alone, completely alone. Then I delivered the final, undeniable blow. "You wanted to humiliate me publicly, but you should have known. I don't break, I build, and I have built your ruin, here, now, in front of everyone who matters." Marcus's shoulders slumped. He looked around, desperate, as whispers turned into murmurs, murmurs turned into quiet statements of accusation, and every eye silently passed judgment. The empire he had clung to, the persona he had cultivated, the charm he had weaponized, all of it crumbled. His shoulders slumped, and for the first time in public, he appeared small, insignificant, defeated. The man who had slapped me, who had controlled, manipulated, and lied, was exposed completely. I didn't gloat, I didn't celebrate, I simply stood there, calm and composed, a stark contrast to his unraveling chaos. I let the room absorb the full weight of what had happened. Then, softly, I said, "This isn't revenge, this is justice, the kind that comes when you underestimate the person you've wronged." Marcus's mouth opened again, but this time no words came. His collapse was complete. Everyone saw it, everyone understood it, and I knew that nothing, no charm, no money, no apology could save him now. This was the pinnacle, the turning point, the moment when control shifted completely. And from here, the path was clear. The days after the gala were surreal. News outlets reported every detail, the wedding slap, the viral videos, and the evidence of Marcus's misconduct.
Social media exploded, turning the story into a worldwide sensation. But for me, it wasn't about attention, it was about closure, justice, and reclaiming my life. Marcus's empire, once pristine and untouchable, was crumbling. Board members resigned quietly, partners pulled out, and clients demanded explanations. The offshore accounts and falsified invoices I had exposed were now under formal investigation. His personal life collapsed in parallel. Friends abandoned him, family relations grew tense, and even minor acquaintances whispered behind his back. The man who had slapped me in public was now publicly, professionally, and privately unraveling.
I moved through the chaos with a calm I had never felt before. Invitations, messages, and congratulations came my way, not for revenge, but for courage. People admired the strength I had shown, the poise I maintained even while orchestrating the ultimate dismantling of someone who had believed he was untouchable. Every day, Marcus grew more desperate. His calls went unanswered, emails remained unopened. Legal threats arrived, but they were hollow, unsupported, and ultimately futile. I had documented everything meticulously, ensuring that his every attempt at retaliation would only reinforce the narrative of his exposure. The satisfaction wasn't in seeing him panic, it was in watching the truth settle. He had underestimated me, assumed my silence, my compliance, my fear, and that mistake had cost him everything. Friends who had once doubted my resolve now reached out, offering support and admiration. Family members who had worried about my reputation now expressed pride, relief, and validation. I realized that the public spectacle had liberated me from fear, from doubt, and from the shadow Marcus had tried to cast over my life. I began to rebuild, focusing on my own growth, my own success, my own happiness. Every event I attended, every decision I made, every conversation carried a subtle but undeniable reminder. I had survived, I had conquered, and I had thrived despite the attempt to break me. Meanwhile, Marcus's presence faded. Once central, he was now peripheral, a cautionary tale, a story of hubris, a man who had believed he could dominate and control, only to be undone by his own actions and underestimating the person he had wronged. And the final proof of my victory? He never regained the confidence, the charm, or the control he had wielded. Even when he tried to maintain appearances, people saw through the facade. He had been dismantled not with violence or anger, but with truth, strategy, and resolve. I stood in the aftermath, finally free from manipulation, free from fear, free from the shadow of a man who had thought he could define my life. And in that freedom, I discovered something far more powerful than revenge: empowerment. From that point forward, my life was mine, my choices, my success, my happiness, untouched by his interference. And Marcus? He became a footnote, a cautionary tale, a living example of how control and power are illusions when built on lies and cruelty. The wedding had been the spark, the slap, the catalyst, but the truth, the careful, deliberate, unshakable truth, had delivered the final verdict, and I had won, completely. Weeks turned into months, and the world moved on, but the echoes of Marcus's ruin remained. He had become a name people whispered cautiously, a lesson in arrogance and entitlement. His professional reputation was damaged beyond repair, his personal relationships fractured, and his attempts to regain credibility collapsed under scrutiny. For me, life took on a new rhythm, one built on freedom, resilience, and self-respect. I no longer carried the tension of anticipating his next move. I no longer measured my words, my actions, my presence against the possibility of his manipulation. I had reclaimed every ounce of myself that he had once tried to control. Friends, family, and colleagues noticed the change immediately. There was a lightness in my step, a confidence in my voice, a calm in my demeanor that couldn't be ignored. I began pursuing projects and opportunities I had deferred for years, carving a path of success that was completely my own. Even the media attention settled into admiration rather than scandal. Articles praised my courage, my intelligence, and my ability to navigate a complex situation with strategy rather than emotion. People reached out to me, inspired by the way I had turned humiliation into empowerment. I also made a deliberate choice to focus on closure rather than vindictiveness. Marcus's downfall was complete, but I didn't seek to torment him further. His reputation, relationships, and opportunities had already crumbled. Letting the truth speak for itself was more than sufficient.
The universe had delivered the consequences, and I didn't need to add to them. In private moments, I reflected on the journey. The wedding slap had been shocking, yes, but it had also been a catalyst, a moment of clarity that revealed both the depth of his deceit and my own strength. I realized that survival wasn't enough. Thriving, reclaiming my narrative, and refusing to be silenced were the true victories. As months passed, the fear, the anxiety, and the chaos associated with Marcus faded entirely from my life. I cultivated meaningful connections with people who valued honesty, integrity, and respect. I invested in my passions, my career, and my personal growth. I built a life of stability, respect, and independence. Occasionally, I would see mentions of Marcus online, news stories, quiet murmurs, fleeting attention, but none of it touched me. He was a chapter that had closed, a cautionary tale, a lesson in underestimating the strength of someone he thought he could control. And in that closure, I found the final truth. Empowerment isn't about revenge. It isn't about proving someone wrong or orchestrating their ruin. It's about reclaiming your own power, your own voice, and your own life, and ensuring that nothing and no one can ever take it from you again. The wedding was long over. The slap was now a memory, but the victory, the reclamation of dignity, control, and truth was permanent. I had not only survived Marcus, I had transcended him, and that was the ultimate triumph.